campaigning well underway for the Senedd elections. We're meeting the leaders of all political parties as we head towards May the 6th for a bite-sized version of their manifesto. This afternoon, I'm joined by Anthony Slaughter from Wales Green Party. It's fielding 4 candidates on each of its 5 regional lists, as well as candidates in 13 of the 40 constituency seats. It's been a massive year of change. Let's start off by talking about COVID recovery. What is your plan of action, especially for healthcare?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a challenging year. It's been an incredible year, and it's been a year that's exposed so much that we suspected was wrong with our society, systemic failures across our society. And it's been a year that's also shown us who really matters, the workers that really matter, not just the healthcare workers, but the delivery drivers, the supermarket staff. It's really exposed some serious home truths about our society. And we need to make sure that as we come out of it, and hopefully we are coming out of it now due to the success of the vaccination programmes and the Welsh lockdown, we need to make sure that we don't go back to, and it's a glib phrase that we're all using, we can't go back to business as usual. We've got to build something better back. So in terms of our policies on COVID, we want to see the health, our health service, National Health Service, has been incredible, but it has exposed how vulnerable and overstretched it is. How they've coped is beyond belief. We have to put our National Health Service back on a footing, fit to cope with future pandemics, future crises. I mean, I was speaking to Welsh members of the NHS Say No campaign recently about their call for a 15% pay rise, and shocked to find out that in real terms, since 2010, National Health Service workers have taken a 15 to 20% pay cut. These are the people we were out there clapping for. Clapping isn't enough. We need to pay them properly. We need to make sure the NHS has the money it needs to provide the invaluable service it does. And we also need to look at how that service is delivered. We need it delivered locally within communities. Of course, there are some things, some treatments where we will need big centralised health centres and hospitals, but we need to look at closer to community services, in sort of services that people can walk to, get a bus to. That's part of how we would look at taking things forward as we move forward differently. The other thing I'd like to say about COVID as well is we do think, and I've got a lot of respect for a lot of the things the Welsh Government have done, and First Minister Mark Drakeford, but we do think that an investigation, an inquiry, a public inquiry into what went wrong and what went right, and why decisions were made, needs to happen sooner rather than later, so that we can learn from those mistakes or those misunderstandings to stop future mistakes as we go ahead. And we'd even go so far as to implement a sort of short-term inquiry before the public one. We really need to look at what went right and what went wrong. And some things did go right. This isn't a sort of finger-wagging exercise, but it has to make us seriously look at how we organise so many aspects of our life and society, because we were very vulnerable and we didn't need to be that vulnerable.
Some of the issues the Green Party has been speaking about for years, especially climate change, are now at the fore of all party policies, especially at the Senedd election. You're calling for drastic action to tackle the emergency. So what exactly are you proposing?
I'm glad you used the word emergency. It is an emergency, and a word we've been using for a long time. And we welcome the recognition across other political parties of the urgency of the situation, and the declaration by the Welsh Government and various councils, local authorities, of a climate emergency started with the Green Party motion in Bristol, Carl Adenia, was the first climate emergency motion. And we recognise this, we welcome this recognition, but it's also a case, and we're in a different position possibly from England and Wales, in that the Welsh Government has a better grasp of the issues and is perhaps slightly more ambitious, but implementation doesn't live up to ambition. And the Welsh Government have already admitted that they're not on track currently to meet their targets for carbon zero by 2050. Which was the agreement from previous COP conferences. We would argue that 2050 isn't in line with the science. The science demands net zero by 2030 if we're going to mitigate the worst effects of global warming and climate change and keep to that 1.5 degrees, which is already looking incredibly difficult. 2030 is challenging, there's no denying that, but we have to have that level of ambition and that sense of urgency. So if you consider that the Senedd can be next term 5 years, by the end of that term, we are getting to the point where it is too late to do what's needed. So we need to see increased sense of urgency with action from governments at Welsh Government level and a Westminster level and a global level. And that's why it's one of the messages we're taking out there. We have been telling people about this for a very long time. So you need that Green voice in the room, that critical friend, because yes, let's be honest, Wales Green Party aren't going to form the next government, but we would be that voice in the Senedd holding the next Welsh government to account and making sure they delivered at the speed, the pace and the urgency that's needed.
16 and 17-year-olds hedge the polls for the first time in Wales this spring. Many are concerned about their future, whether it be career opportunities or saving the planet. What assurances can you offer them that you have the policies to help deliver change?
Firstly, so pleased that 16 and 17-year-olds have got the vote in this election. It's been a long-standing Green Party policy that votes at 16 should happen. And you're absolutely right. 16 and 17 young people understand the urgency. And going back beyond these last 12 months, it was so inspiring. There were 12 months of the school strike for climate and the fair grades strike. Young people out there, because it's their future, they are inheriting this mess. And it's not just the climate emergency, it's the growing inequality in our society. They face such an uncertain future. And they're aware of that, and they're looking and demanding a genuine response from political parties. It's not enough to patronise young people anymore. And I'm confident that our message resonates strongly with young people. Young people know that we have been on the right side of this argument for a very long time. We will fight. We also recognise how it's all interlinked. There is no climate justice without environment, without social justice. No climate justice without racial justice. All these issues, inequality, precarious lives, lifestyles, climate emergency, are all linked. And young people see that in our policies. And one thing I'm really proud of, as you mentioned at the beginning, we're standing a full slate on each of the regional lists across Wales. Of those 5 candidates, 2 are young Greens. We have 2 lead list candidates who are under 30. So if young people want to vote for people who understand them, what better way of doing that than voting for people the same age as them?
1 in 3 people in Wales are living in poverty. Thousands are homeless, some sofa surfing. How do you aim to tackle the issue and ensure everyone has a roof over their head?
The statistic, it's a bit like the COVID deaths. That statistic is shocking. It is outrageous. And it's even more outrageous that it's just become something we talk about, 1 in 3 in poverty. We've had 20 years of devolution. We've had 20 years of a Labour-led administration. This just shouldn't be the case. Equality has to be intergenerational or it's nothing. So we have a raft of policies on this, on how we would create a better future, a better, greener, fairer future for Wales and a different sort of economy. One of the things that we talk a lot about, and again, like the climate, it's something we're really pleased other parties are taking on board now, is the universal basic income as a first step. Now, universal basic income isn't a silver bullet. It doesn't fix all of society's woes, but it's the first step into giving everyone that security, that solid base to start from and to build their life on. And we're really pleased over the last 12 months to see the growing progressive cross-party support for that issue in Wales. So that was a key one for us. We'd also look at working with trade unions. We need to reverse recent decades of this move into the gig economy. We need to get rid of precarious lifestyles. We need to get rid of, we hear a lot, we talk about 1 in 3 in poverty. We talk about the massive increase in food banks. And we forget that a lot of those people using the food banks are people in work. We have in-work poverty, and that is just, in the 21st century, as part of the United Kingdom, supposedly the 6th biggest economy in the world, it is not acceptable, and we would change that.
There's been much debate about Wales' independence. You say you will campaign in favour of this in the event of a referendum. Why?
Well, we've always been, the Green Party, Wales Green Party, is an internationalist party that believes in localism. We believe that power should be devolved and exercised at the lowest possible level to the people it affects. So for us, an independent Wales makes complete sense in that regard. It's long been Wales Green Party policy that independence is a long-term aspiration for Wales. But in recent years, especially following the post-Brexit fallout, and we're witnessing this Westminster power grab, and I think this is what's influenced our members, because it was at our conference last autumn where it was almost unanimously passed this motion that Wales, because the other thing to remember is that Wales Green Party, like all Green parties, the Green Party, are policies made by members at conference. It's not a top-down structure. And it was an almost unanimous decision that Wales Green Party would come down on that side of the fence. If there was a referendum, we would support independence. And I think what drove our members to embrace that so wholeheartedly was this post-Brexit fallout, this Westminster power grab. We see it with the Internal Markets Bill, the arguing over the Shared Prosperity Fund, the setting up of Westminster trade branches in the developed nations,